There's one narrow stretch of water that much of the world depends on for its energy: the Strait of Hormuz. And right now, one country sits in the most powerful position to take it hostage: Iran. Because in this narrow waterway, geography gives Tehran a dangerous advantage. And by the end of this video, you'll see why even the world's most powerful navy cannot easily neutralize it. Iran knows exactly how powerful its geographic position is. They haven't kept it secret. In fact, it has made it clear that if pushed, it is prepared to weaponize this geographic advantage. With the recent exchange of devastating missile strikes across the region, one thing has become unmistakably clear: Iran's position in this narrow strait is far more powerful than many had assumed. And as the situation escalates, it is beginning to look like the United States may have underestimated just how decisive that geographic leverage could be.
Trump is calling on other countries to help secure safe passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz.
Let's get more now on US President Donald Trump calling on other countries to send warships to the Strait of Hormuz.
To understand why Iran holds this kind of leverage, we first need to understand the geography of the Strait of Hormuz. It is the narrow gateway that connects the Persian Gulf to the open waters of the Gulf of Oman. In simple terms, almost all of the Gulf's oil must pass through this single passage before it can reach the rest of the world. In 2024 alone, roughly 20 million barrels of oil move through the Strait of Hormuz every single day. That is about 1/5 of the world's petroleum supply. But here's the problem. The strait is incredibly narrow compared to the number of ships that must pass through it. At its tightest point, the entire passage is only about 33 kilometers wide, and ships don't even use most of that space. Tankers move through just two narrow corridors, each only about 3 kilometers wide. One lane for ships entering the Gulf, one lane for ships leaving it. And this narrow gap is exactly what makes the Strait of Hormuz so vulnerable. Recent events are already proving it. Missiles have reportedly been launched near the northern side of the strait. Since the conflict began on February 28th, more than a dozen commercial vessels, including several oil tankers, have been attacked or damaged. The more troubling reality is that Iran's new supreme leader, Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei, has shown no sign of backing down, and that leaves Washington with fewer and fewer options. President Trump has already turned to America's allies, asking them to help secure the Strait of Hormuz. At the same time, he warned that the United States could strike Iran's most important oil facility on Karg Island if Tehran continues interfering with ships passing through the strait. But this raises a bigger question. Why is the most powerful man in the world trying to pressure an embattled nation over this stretch of water? The United States commands one of the most powerful navies on Earth. So why not simply deploy these forces and crush any Iranian attempt to disrupt the strait? Because in reality, the situation in this strait is far more complicated. And the reason comes down to one simple factor: geography. The northern coastline of the strait belongs almost entirely to Iran. It seemed like luck was on this nation's side when this terrain was sculpted millions of years ago. The coastline isn't flat. Rather, it has hills and mountains that overlook the narrow channel below. From these heights, some of the largest ships on Earth pass through the narrow channel below. These elevated areas create natural vantage points for radar systems, surveillance equipment, and missile launch sites. Iran is effectively sitting on a natural watchtower above the strait. From these heights, the nation's forces can monitor traffic moving through the strait with remarkable clarity. But the real advantage becomes clear once ships actually enter the strait. Out in the open ocean, powerful navies have enormous freedom of movement. Warships can maneuver across vast distances, constantly changing position and keeping threats far away. But inside the narrow corridor of the strait, ships lose much of that freedom. Their routes become predictable. Their room to maneuver shrinks dramatically, and every vessel moving through the strait is forced to follow the same narrow shipping lanes. In effect, the ships are funneled into a predictable path. Iran doesn't need to search for ships across thousands of kilometers of ocean. All it has to do is wait. Once they have the target, they could then activate those launchers concealed among mountains and rocky terrain. Once a missile is fired, the ships below have very little room to escape. In such a narrow passage, even the most advanced warships would struggle to maneuver. And that's exactly why the U.S. Navy has been hesitant to escort commercial ships through the strait. For now, officials say the risk of attack is simply too high, and the cost of protecting every vessel would be enormous. But Iran's coastline is only half the story, because inside the Strait of Hormuz itself, Iran controls several islands positioned right beside the shipping lanes. In effect, these islands function like forward outposts, sitting in the middle of one of the world's most important energy routes. More than these physical advantages, the geography changes the rules of naval warfare in this strait. Because of the narrow waters and rugged coastline, Iran need not try to match the massive fleets of major naval powers. Instead, it uses what analysts call an asymmetric strategy. Iran focuses on smaller, cheaper systems that are far more effective in tight waterways like the Strait of Hormuz. Fast attack boats are a good example. These small vessels can move quickly through the shallow waters of the Gulf and approach larger ships in coordinated groups. A single boat may not pose much of a threat, but when many of them swarm together, even large warships can struggle to deal with them. But Iran's strategy does not rely on weapons alone. There is another factor that works strongly in its favor: psychology. Iran does not actually need to defeat the United States Navy in a traditional battle. Instead, its real objective is much simpler. It only needs to create enough uncertainty that shipping companies begin to hesitate. In other words, Iran does not need full control of the Strait of Hormuz to disrupt it. Sometimes creating fear is already enough. And in that sense, Iran may have already achieved what it set out to do. In the first few days of the conflict, traffic through the normally busy Strait of Hormuz quickly began to thin out. The reason was simple. Insurance companies and shipping operators began to see the route as too risky. Many concluded it was no longer safe to pass through the strait's narrow, winding waterway. But this raises a natural question. If the Strait of Hormuz becomes too dangerous, are there any alternatives? To some extent, yes. For years, Gulf states have understood the danger of relying entirely on a single waterway. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have built pipelines that allow some of their oil exports to bypass the strait. But those pipelines can only carry a fraction of the region's total production. The vast majority of oil still has only one way out, and that's the Strait of Hormuz. In the end, Iran has shown that not even the most advanced weapons created by humans could match the power bestowed by nature. Perhaps the US has underestimated Iran in this regard. But what are your thoughts about this? Hope you like our story. As always, see you in the next one.